Well, hello and welcome to the Wine Access Unfiltered podcast. I am delighted to be back in our studio today in the great state of California, where I was not born. Hence the whole theme of this episode, which is a love letter to California. Some of you probably already know that I grew up on the East Coast in Philadelphia, and when I moved out here to California, this place was way bigger and way more diverse than I ever gave it credit for. And since being here and learning about this place, I've come to realize that a lot of people sort of thought the way that I did when I was growing up. I didn't realize that California wasn't just this one big homogenized place. It was this incredible state that had diverse terrains and lots of different grapes and beautiful places that didn't look like each other within a 2 to 3 hour drive. And it was kind of wild to me. So that's what today is all about, exploring California and all of the different terrains and terroirs. And there's really no better person to do it than my guest today, Helen Keplinger, winemaker extraordinaire here in Napa Valley, but also all around the state of California. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Try to live up to this expectation here.
There's no expectation. This is just two gals hanging out with wine.
Cheers on a Friday.
On a Friday. Ooh, it smells so yummy. Okay, so this is your wine. And for those of you who are part of the Wine Access Unfiltered podcast wine club, well, I should mention two things. Number one, we don't usually do this. We don't usually have the winemaker of the wine from the podcast on the show. We try to keep them separate, but I thought it was really appropriate to do it today. But for those of you who are part of the podcast wine club, this is your wine today. Do we say Vermillion or Vermillion?
Vermillion.
Vermillion. Mm-hmm. And what's the meaning behind the name?
So Vermillion is actually a collection of hues, and it was a popular color in Renaissance times for paintings. Oh. But it's a range of red hues, so it runs all the way from, it was made from cinnabar originally, but it runs all the way from kind of a lighter orange-hued red to a darker, really red-hued red. Oh. So we thought it was the perfect name for this wine because this wine, from its inception, has always been a blend of reds, and that also changes a little bit every year. So it's encapsulated in the name.
I love that. It's super appropriate. If you look at the back label of this wine, there's a lot of grapes and a lot of places, and that is not easy to do, I suspect, as a winemaker, right? Like, to pull grapes from all of these. I mean, these aren't close places. Like, these are many hours drive to get everything together, right?
Yes, they are.
So
very
why?
Spread out.
Did you grow up here? I guess I should start there. Did you grow up in California?
No, I grew up close to you in Ohio, and then did undergrad on the East Coast in Massachusetts, lived in Boston, did a year as an English teacher volunteer in Thailand, traveled a lot, returned to Southeast Asia, moved back to Boston, thought I would go to medical school, and then in the process of working on applications where you turn yourself inside out and try to figure out what your true desires are, I came to really find that I really wanted to find something to pursue that I would love every day.
Yeah.
And I was always interested in wine. My parents were huge wine drinkers and wine lovers. Okay. My mom is an incredible cook. They, for their honeymoon in 1967, did Michelin-starred restaurants in France. I mean, they were
God, your parents were so cool.
They were ahead of their time,
wow.
And they loved wine. But my dad had a wine cellar, but was never a trophy drinker. He would research wines that were very value-oriented wines that could deliver pleasure, but could be not so painful in the pocketbook, so that they could enjoy them every night.
Wow.
So it was just a lifestyle. It wasn't, they did have great bottles, but every night they just drank wine.
Do you remember like what some of his favorites were, or their favorites were, like that were not super expensive?
Totally. I mean, when I was really little, it was the Parmesans and the Lancers and, all of these bottles, which I totally collected. I would have the interesting bottles in my room when I was a kid.
We had very different childhoods.
But then they had Mondavi, they had Martini, they had a ton of Louis Martini wines.
So they were California drinkers.
Largely California drinkers,
Which
yes.
I feel like was kind of unusual in that time. Like for the East Coast as well, which tends to be a more European-leaning area.
Right. No, he and I mean my mom's brothers as well. They all had similar cellars that were these Mondavi, Louis Martini, BV.
So did you come out? Did your parents come out here, and did you come with
them? They
them?
came out, but they they didn't take us on their trips. They would go to Europe. They would come to San Francisco, and they would leave us at home.
There you go. Coloring books will be in California.
Yeah. Yes. So no, they didn't bring us. The first time I came, I was, I think I was 20, maybe.
Yeah.
And that was a long time ago. I won't tell you how long ago because I know you can do the math. But it was before the time of high traffic in Napa Valley, and so doing the bike tours was totally easy because there was no traffic, and so we biked all around the valley and wine tasted. It was really fun.
And obviously not really considering wine as a career at that point, though.
No, not at all.
Just like
I was on this
like an avid
science,
consumer.
Interest in science track. So no, it was just pure enjoyment. But then so when I was living in Boston and I had done medical research for a few years.
You were cold and tired. Yeah.
And there was a great wine shop in Western Mass I used to go to, and I'd read about wine and buy a case and try to learn a region while I was doing these, let's go to med school pursuits. And then when I really realized I just wasn't so sure that would be what I wanted to do for my whole life. That question in your 20s that you try to answer that feels so overwhelming.
Because it is overwhelming.
But in that time, I was really trying to tease out what are the interests, and I loved nature, I loved travel, I loved art, I loved history, I loved food, I loved wine, I liked science, all of these things that really tie together in wine, in winemaking. And so I found that Davis had a graduate program in viticulture and enology. And once I discovered that, I stopped the medical school applications. I'd done the first round, but I stopped. And then I decided to go travel. And so I went back to Southeast Asia, did a cross-country trip, moved to California, applied to Davis, and that was that. Yeah.
Sort of.
Yeah.
What were your first perceptions or impressions of California when you got here? Like, did you know how big this place was?
No, and I think at that time the wine industry felt very impenetrable and very local.
Like from a professional standpoint.
Yes.
Okay.
Because actually, when I graduated from undergrad, I applied to this really broad range of laboratory positions. But I liked wine then. So in addition to applying to like the electron microscopy lab in Colorado, I applied to a wine lab thinking I could do, that's an in and that could be interesting for a little bit. No one replied to me in California.
Really?
And then when I was in grad school at Davis, I had sort of researched all of these super talented winemakers who I admired. And I wrote all of them cover letters and sent my resume. And I mean, again, I had very few, Heidi Barrett was basically the one who looked at my resume and said, let's, give it to Ren Harris at Paradigm and said, you need to interview this girl.
I just got like chills. That's so cool.
But nobody else replied to me. So it just felt very, local.
Yeah. Well, I think for some people it does feel that way even still. Do you feel like Napa's changed a lot? Yeah.
I do. I feel like it's changed a lot. We have so many people from, you're from Philadelphia.
Yeah.
I mean, name the people who actually were born in Napa, and it's quite few. I think it's quite a dynamic group now of people who've come here because of a passion for food or wine or hospitality.
Totally. Well, it's the place, right? Yeah. It's the place that you didn't know existed, that if you are a food and a wine lover and you love beautiful things and you love to travel, like, it's crazy the amount of things that you have in this tiny little place.
It's true.
All of these little luxuries that shouldn't exist in this farming community.
Right. And in addition to that, connections to the people who have those same loves or interests in many other places around the state, on the West Coast, country, world. So it feels like endless possibilities almost.
It is so special. I'm glad that we're doing this episode because I think there is such a deep love for this place that if you live here, you understand it. And I think if you visit here, you understand it to a degree. But I don't know. It's just so much bigger and different than I think I ever could have realized growing up on the East Coast. And obviously coming from New York as a Somm where everything is European. California is this one thing. It can't do, all Chardonnays from here are oaky and buttery and big, and all Cabernets are oaky and big and over the top. And then you get here and you're like, well, there's like a few other things happening here that we're not aware of on the East Coast. So I think, it's time that we sort of pull back the curtain on this place. I know that you source from a wide range of AVAs, which we will dive into, but can you take us on a little road trip down California, maybe starting north or wherever you want to go, and kind of guide us through this very big stage?
Oh my gosh. Well, for this wine or just in general?
Well, let's do this wine. So this is like, the roadmap here.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So first a little bit about Vermillion. So my husband and partner in crime, DJ,
yes,
and I make Keplinger wines, which are started with Rhone varietals. And I guess I have to back up another step because I made wine in Terroir for 3 years. And I went there because I was really just so fascinated and impressed by the wines made there. And then working there just fell so head over heels for the varietals, which the main varietal is Grenache. And if you think about Priorat, it was such a lesson in terroir because it's a region that largely has one terroir, which is Liguria, which is slate and clay, packed into these like little matchbox-sized pieces on these crazy slopes. But the structure of that soil means that you have vineyards that can be dry farmed because the roots can make their way through all of those little fissures, and the pieces of rock actually break quite easily. So they're old vineyards. And when I was there, I worked with 100-year-old Grenache and Carignan, and it was incredible. But I think the big take-home lesson for me was that I worked with Grenache from maybe 6, 7 different sites. And the wines were wildly different. So same soil, but all of these different communes within the region had different elevations, different aspects, different slopes, different humidities, temperature gradients, and they made really different wine. And so when I came back to Napa, I wanted to start with that because my thought was that this would be my little passion project, and it would be something that would kind of keep me sharp and keep me fulfilled, and I could explore Grenache and Rhone varietals in this area. And so we started Keplinger as single vineyard, and in that process, our single vineyard wines were a little more expensive, and we had a lot of people who would say to us, "We love your wine, we save it for special occasions." And also in the process of making that wine, not everything would go into those wines. I would still sit down and look at every single barrel and what, things would be, different blocks would be harvested or fermented separately. It just depended on how the season went. And so not everything made those final wines because the goal was to make the best wine. And so I would occasionally have little bits that didn't make it. And so we, different things happen with those over the years, but it was always very heartbreaking to see great wine just kind of not make it into the bottling. And then also to have this interest in, and so this comes from an intersection of things. So, really great leftover wine, wanting to make something that was much more accessible, having the experience of being in Europe and drinking very fair-priced wines that were so good. They were just simple and enjoyable and well-made and very well-priced. So really great. So we wanted to do something like that. And then also a lot of inexpensive wines in this country, this is the dirty little secret I'm about to tell, are leftovers bought up from other people. And that's called bulk wine. And the prices for those are quite low, which drives a low price. So the only problem with that is you don't really know what's been done to that wine.
Right.
And in winemaking, I really care the most about the site and the farming. And then when you have those two things, you don't really need to cover anything up with weird or wild winemaking tools. And so it was finding really good vineyards that were fair priced, making them in a very simple way, using similar techniques that I use with Keplinger, like low temperature aging, so that they can be aged with very little sulfur, not fining, not filtering, just trying to make a great wine that you could feel good about, and you could still feel good in the morning after drinking it, but for a good price. And so that was Vermillion. So because of that, the grape market fluctuates, and so in finding fruit that can be that can meet this price point, I've had to move. And so I have a lot of...
You gotta get creative.
Yeah, you have to get creative. So I have a lot of experience working in the foothills, and by and large, a lot of that fruit is quite well priced. It's gotten a lot more expensive over the years, but that's the first place we'll go. So from Napa, you travel up toward Lake Tahoe, north or south, doesn't really matter. But that whole area has these gorgeous vineyards that have incredible soils. And the formation of the Sierras, they were kind of sloughed down and then pushed back up. And so the soils they run the gamut from basically two main types. One is this volcanic Sierra uplift soil. So it's a red volcanic, and then it has big chunks of quartz and basalt, shale, soapstone. And then you also have other places that are lava caps. I guess this is still in the volcanic category, but volcanic, really red soils, and then granite and decomposed granite. Yeah. These soils that look like granola, and so they make beautiful wines. You know, they're just high elevation.
Right. And temperature-wise, we're in a very different place as well.
Temperature-wise is very different because you're farther away from the ocean. So the big difference, you know, when you're near the ocean, the temperature summations are quite gradual because you have the influence of the Pacific or the San Pablo, San Francisco Bay, if it's Napa and bottom of Sonoma. But those temperatures kind of come up more slowly during the day and drop down more slowly at night. In the foothills, you get precipitous increases. It just goes straight up. But at night, it drops straight back down. So you get these wild swings of, 50 degrees between daytime and night, and that cold air is really coming from the higher elevations coming down. So really incredible region.
And so what does really well grape-wise in somewhere like the Sierra Foothills? Like, is it Cabernet? Is it Grenache? Is it something else that we have never talked about?
Yeah, it's funny because I think it's one of... I think some of the old guard in the Sierra Foothills feels like part of the problem is they don't have an identity of we grow this. Yeah. But the huge upside is that they can grow so many things. Yeah. I mean, okay, the exception of really good Pinot Noir and really good Chardonnay, but they can grow Cabernet. I think their strengths are the Rhone varietals, the Italian varietals, and Spanish varietals. So...
And is that because of that temperature swing? Is it because of the soils? Like, what do you think?
Both. Yeah, I think it's both.
And does it remind you of when you were in Priorat, or do you find them to be just completely different?
Different. Yeah. Because the soils are really different. But I think on those granites, you can make really incredible mineral-driven whites, mineral-driven Syrah, which is gorgeous.
I always forget how broad Syrah can be.
Totally.
Which is so fun.
Yeah. Gamay.
Yes.
And then if you think about the volcanic soils, I mean, you've got, the Grenache and Mourvedre and Counoise and Barbera and there's Nebbiolo. I mean, so there are a lot of different things, I think,
which are not like grapes that you normally, like, you don't normally hear Nebbiolo and Grenache in the same sentence. Like,
true.
They don't normally play together, which I also think is sort of the beauty of California, is that it can it can provide a place for all of these different grapes to have a home, which is not the case in most places.
True. And I mean, I think visualizing the Sierra Foothills helps because you're dealing with a topography that has faces, right? Different aspects. So you can put the Nebbiolo and the Syrah on a north face, and it really moderates those daytime highs. And you can put something that likes heat a little bit more, like a Grenache or Mourvedre, on a south or a west, and really use just the topography of the region to your advantage.
So do we know on this wine
what came from where?
Yeah. So like the Sierra Foothills is, because if you look at the back of this label, it's 42% Grenache, 40% Syrah, 9% Petit Syrah, 4% Mourvèdre, 4% Graciano, and 1% Cabernet Sauvignon. And
so, first mystery behind door number 1 of El Dorado, we have Grenache and Mourvèdre coming from the Foothills.
And do they come from anywhere else in this blend?
Yes.
Okay. So how does the Grenache and the Syrah from El Dorado different from another place? Like, do you find brightness there? Like, do you feel like the grapes, like, what do they give you that's different there?
Oh, that's such a great question. I think the beauty of Grenache and Mourvèdre I'll start with Grenache because they're different. So the Grenache in the Foothills has the beautiful red fruit, the kind of the wild strawberries, and maybe a little kirsch, but it's not really very kirschy. And then it's got lots of garrigue. So really beautiful garrigue.
There's so much garrigue
wild
in this wine.
Herbs. And a really pretty floral note. And then the Mourvèdre is really interesting in this region because most of El Dorado is there's granite, but a lot of it is volcanic, the red soils. And the Mourvèdre, I find from up there, is very roasted herbs and gunmetal, lavender, and shows kind of a red iron character from the soil.
Yeah.
So really cool. And they don't get, because of that those two from El Dorado is a pretty high elevation region, so it's not really hot.
Yeah.
And so you get a moderate, like a really pretty balance and a great minerality from those two varietals in that area.
Gosh, I just keep going back to this wine, and if you're drinking with us, I think you could throw, if you had like a dartboard with all of the different things, you could throw a dart and like you would land on something that's in this glass because, there's so many different things going on in here. But it's crazy how cohesive it is. Like, you'd think with so many things in the pot,
but
something
with each other.
would, but they don't. Like, they work super well together, and I think, it's fun as we're talking about this and I'm smelling the wine. And it's got that garrigue, and it's got the sort of that like leathery saddle, herby, lavender. Like there's so many different things. Do you find that this wine, and I've only played with this a handful of times, like as it sits and it opens, is it something that changes aromatically?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I find, in general, I haven't seen it yet with this, but often when you have those blends of the different varietals, they just, you might open it one time and the Mourvèdre might be showing more. You might open it again and it might be the Grenache. But I think that's what's so wonderful about wine, is to see the wine change.
Yeah.
Well,
it's also what makes a wine like this so perfect at the price point, and that it is for like a Tuesday, Wednesday night wine, is that it can be all of these different things, right? So like, you can have it throughout the course of the week. If you're someone like, I don't drink a full bottle of wine a night because I will die if I do that every night.
Yeah.
But, it's one of these wines that like I can open on a Monday and have, a glass of until Thursday or Friday.
Definitely.
And have it kind of play with lots of different things that I'm eating because it has all these things to work with.
Definitely.
Which is fun.
Definitely. Yes. And it's made to be like that. I guess just in preferences and philosophies of winemaking, I prefer to have wines that have evolution and that you can open on one night and keep drinking it over the course of a few days, and that, over the course of an evening and then those few days, it continues to evolve and, showcase something a little bit different.
Yeah.
So
it's really fun.
Yeah.
Where should we travel to next?
Okay. Next we'll go down, so we'll head back west.
Okay.
And then we'll head south and we'll stop in Paso Robles. So this is a super fun...
I'm going to stop you because I know not like literally stop you. I just would like to point out that she said Paso Robles. I can't tell you how many people tell me that I say Paso Robles incorrectly.
That's Paso Robles? Is that what we're supposed to say?
No, that's anyone you talk to in Paso says Paso Robles. And I've asked many people, like, what is it? No,
it's possible.
No, I'm pointing out that you who work there and know that, and like we've spent time in Paso together. I posted a number of videos on Paso, And I have asked the people who run, like, Visit Paso, Travel Pat, like, how should I say this properly? And every time it's Paso Robles. And then every time in the comment section, it's just these wars.
Robles.
Yes.
Los Robles.
Right. So yes, is there a traditional Spanish pronunciation? Absolutely. But we also don't say like Los Angeles. Like it's not, we say Los Angeles. Like, so anyway, back to Paso. Sorry. I just had to sidebar. If for anyone out there who's like, it's Paso Robles. It's not.
Say whatever you want.
Do what you want. It's fine. Just don't fight with everyone in the comments.
So, I mean, I think in the course of this conversation, it'll be really clear that every region you can't really just summarize in one sentence. There's variability to all of them, which might feel overwhelming, but it's really beautiful, and it's part of what makes it just endlessly intriguing. And I think we'll never know it all, and that's the beauty, and that's what keeps it so fascinating.
Yeah.
So Paso Robles, if you wanted to break it down into simple terms, you have east and west.
Right.
And I feel like the east side gets maligned because it's the one that's thought of as the lesser, and it's an area that's thought of as just being these big expanses of kind of commercially farmed fruit, and it's hot. So I went into it a bit ignorant, but was, again, looking for well-priced fruit that was farmed well. I knew a farmer who was working on the west side and talked to them about well-priced fruit, and ended up looking on the east side. And the east side is fascinating.
Yeah.
It's this huge area. So whatever I described to you, just realize that it's probably representing 5% of the whole area, which I do not know well. But what I've seen is you do have these big, rolling, beautiful areas. The properties tend to be a lot larger. But there's also a big piece of it that are all of these plateaus and ledges and terraces and creek beds, and it's very interesting.
Yeah.
And the way the air moves through this whole area is very different, and it's gorgeous.
Yeah.
It's so pretty.
I've really fallen in love with Paso over the last few years.
Yeah, and West Side is amazing too, but totally different.
And so, I think both from like I mean, I don't make wine obviously, but I think from, if I had to appreciate the winemaking side, like from a winemaking side and from a tourism side, I think both are really interesting in Paso. And you're seeing, again, even within this area that so often gets maligned, you see so much diversity. Mm-hmm. And it's not just, a lot of people think of Paso, oh, it's the big Vermillion varieties and, these big, huge cabs and big everything. And it's not. Like these places within Paso, I mean, there's certainly going to be those styles of wines, but there's so much more there than people realize.
So true.
Yeah.
So true. So the first region is, I think this would be this is the Morvet and Graciano, come from, no, sorry, I'm flipped. Okay, the Grenache is coming from El Pomar.
Okay.
And that region it's a district. So it's the El Pomar district of Paso Robles, and it's southeast of downtown. And it's this big area that is, it is, I mean, I don't know I don't know the whole region perfectly.
Yeah.
But the fruit that I bought was really, it was from a bit like a big hillside and really cool soils. And the soils here are, they're sedimentary, so you still have this kind of seafloor aspect. You have sedimentary and kind of a silt character. And it's warm.
Yes.
But it's moderated by the Templeton Gap, so the cold air shoots through the Templeton Gap. And so even though this region gets warm, it still has the cooling influence. Yeah. And then east of that is the Creston district of Paso Robles, which is quite a bit bigger. And that has more of the rolling plus the terraces and plateaus. And from there, I got some Petit Syrah and also Morvet, or no, I just said I got the Morvet and Graciano. So also, sorry, I'm getting like flipped. Petit Syrah, Morvet, and Graciano came from there. And it's just warmer. Yeah. So I think that one, what I learned working with that is you just have to be a little bit more on your game in terms of picking. Mm-hmm. Because again, this is a wine that I don't want to be overblown. It's really intended to be something delicious and very food friendly.
Yeah.
So
I was also told when I was down there, I was going around with another winemaker that the limestone soils add so much acidity that like sometimes it can like be hard. Like you kind of have to wait for acids to drop. Do you find that to be the case?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's true. And the other interesting thing about the limestone is it's a sponge. So that's what sucks up and holds the water. So if you dig soil pits, you'll come across a big piece of limestone with all of the roots like plastered against it.
Got it.
Which is really interesting.
Yeah. It was Tony Biaggi, by the way. I didn't want to call him out in case he was wrong, but it was Tony Biaggi.
now that I confirm it, yeah. That's great.
So Paso, and you obviously spend a decent amount of time there.
We try to get down once a month, but
that's a decent amount of time, and that's like
sometimes
a 4.5-ish, 5-hour drive.
4 hours.
Yeah, 4 hour.
You can make it in 3.5 if you time it perfectly, but 4 hours is probably better. Yeah, 4.5.
I will note to not drive with you. Noted.
No, it's more like the weird hours I drive down there during harvest to look at things.
I see.
When there's no traffic.
No, it's fun to be down there. And then when you're down there, do you have any? I'm sure if people are listening to this, you're like, we should go to Paso. Do you have any favorite restaurants?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Easy.
Okay. Which
ones? My like go-to 3.
Yeah.
Which I need to diversify a little bit, but Le Petit Canaille for
Love
sure.
it.
And he just opened another restaurant right on the square. But fabulous food
with a secret menu.
Yes, with a lot of secret
cellar.
yeah, but just such good food.
Yeah.
Like great food made with love.
Yeah.
And then their sommelier team is just like the kindest, most excited, just terrific pairing of somms.
Yeah.
I won't say ever because I don't want to offend anybody, but they're great.
They are great.
And then I love In Bloom
as
well.
I love In Bloom.
So that's a couple who moved out from Chicago, and they make amazing, just small plates, really fresh ingredients, seasonal, creative.
They were the first
delicious.
people that ever gave me a like fried chicken nugget with caviar on it. Like before everyone else was doing it, they did it.
Seriously?
Yes. This was a few years ago, before, I won't call anybody out, but before a few other restaurants. And,
Chicken nugget and not a tater tot?
No, a chicken nugget.
Okay.
Yeah, it was like a piece of fried chicken.
LPC does
they do the dirty
tots.
Yeah. Or I think they may call them something else. But yeah, they do. So they'll do so LPC will do the tots with steak tartare, and they'll do the caviar. But In Bloom will do the chicken nugget with the caviar. And that was like a secret menu as well. I loved In Bloom. I thought that was great.
Yeah.
So what's your third?
Finca.
Oh, I don't know this one.
It's a lunch spot.
Okay.
But delicious.
What kind of food?
Fresh. Like Cal-Mexican
Love that.
food.
Okay.
Like really, really fresh, incredible guacamole and
that is one thing I'm missing on the East Coast.
tacos and things like that. Just delicious.
Yeah, growing up in Ohio, I'm sure your taco game was not strong.
I don't think I had a taco
No,
game.
of course we didn't. My tacos were like the hard shell Old El Paso.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I hated tacos growing up. It was not a food that I touched.
No, so true.
Again, a revelation in California. It's like, oh, this is not what they were supposed to taste like the whole time.
That's so true. That's so true.
All right, those are good racks. I will add Edo Pasta Bar if you're into pasta, which is in Tin City. Those guys are awesome, and they also have a great wine brand that specializes in Italian varieties, especially some great like unusual white wines.
Nice.
And then if you're gonna go for a drink, the Alchemist's Garden.
Oh,
for a
totally.
cocktail.
Yeah.
Yeah, that place is great.
Well, and Amsterdam is so cool.
I don't know Amsterdam.
Amsterdam Cafe.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
The same owner has the Jazz Speakeasy private club.
This will all be
pretty
linked in the
amazing.
description below. Because
anyways,
I'm learning a lot.
It's a pretty cool town.
I love that. Yeah,
Don't
Paso,
tell anyone.
No, Paso's great, and I've told everyone. I'm sorry. I'll link all the things because I've done some travel guides there. But it's a great place with great grapes. So how much? So there's a significant amount of grapes coming from Paso in this wine. 65% Paso. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So where should we go next?
So from Paso, if we head south, we'll go through Santa Maria Valley, and south
Tri-tip country.
Tri-tip country. South of Santa Maria and north of Santa Ynez is Alisos Canyon, relatively new AVA.
Okay.
And the cool thing about that part of the world, Santa Barbara County, is that the mountains are perpendicular to the coast. And so all of those openings allow for unimpeded flow of cold air from the ocean. And this is another region that has that as well.
Yeah.
And the soils are largely sands with some clay. Sometimes you get diatomaceous earth. There was more calcareous shale, limestone kind of in that area. But this vineyard in particular is really fun, and it's own-rooted old vine Syrah, Estrella clone, and it makes this beautiful kind of ethereal, blue-fruited with sweet peas and dried herbs, a green freshness, like a really pretty freshness, and it's super elegant. It's just a beautiful Syrah.
Yeah.
And so I love this region. It's quite late for ripening. It's the last thing I pick. Alcohols are always really low, beautiful acidity, and just the textures and aromatics are so good.
Again, like going back to Syrah just being so many different things. Like even California is diverse.
Yes.
Syrah is given it a run for its money. It's so
true.
It's so crazy. The people that say that they don't like Syrah, I'm like, which one?
I totally agree.
There's so many different versions of it.
It
can be as light as a Pinot. It can be as big as a Petit Syrah, like depending on how it's made. It's just insane. And so the Petit Syrah, the Syrah in this is giving you a little more like brightness, minerality, you think? I don't know. It's hard to like pick these. Like I don't think the point is to pick everything out.
Yeah, I don't. I feel like I can get it. It actually comes across a little more like violets in this glass, but there's the kind of this fresh violet character, and there's a really pretty kind of crushed rock minerality. There's a purple fruit character that I think that's the Syrah, and then there's this graphite, kind of like a pencil lead.
Yeah.
And that's that vineyard, and then there's this elegance that really ties things together.
Yeah. We've mostly been, well, that's not true. I guess now that we're in this area, how far away from the coast are we?
In the Alisos Canyon, I think they're about maybe 12 to 15 miles, so not far.
And then because of the transverse mountains, you're basically getting that coastal influence.
Right. The cold ocean air pulls in pretty strongly.
Yeah. And then as a winemaker, how do you find that coastal influence to affect grapes? Maybe, it can change from place to place, but coastal equals what?
Coastal equals usually slower ripening, usually better retention of acid, usually maybe a little less fruit and a little more minerality. That's not always true, though.
Yeah, there's so many exceptions.
Usually, I know, it's hard to draw generalizations. I mean, it depends on what it is, but in general, you'll have kind of a tempering of fruit character and maybe a greater expression of floral notes and herbs, moderating the alcohols, later picks.
Does it scare you to be more coastal?
More leaner?
Yeah.
I think in both, at both ends, there are extremes.
Yeah.
And I think, drinkers and winemakers have preferences. So I think for me, you could get too close to the coast and have something where it doesn't quite ripen. And maybe that, acid metabolism is so retarded that it doesn't fully, it doesn't go as much as I'd like it to.
Yeah.
I guess I'm speaking from experience of working with a vineyard that retains malic acid and ends up with really, really high malic acids. And then during the malolactic fermentation, you get a really crazy shift in pH. So it's just like getting blindsided by the line change.
Where did all this acid come from?
But and sometimes you can go so far that I think you don't get the ripeness.
Right.
And when I feel like ripeness that word has been totally made into something evil. I'm not talking about overripe. I'm just talking about, getting ripeness.
Right.
But then I also think on that opposite side, you can end up with something that's too hot, the alcohol spike, the fruit gets dehydrated, it's just not fresh.
Right.
So
no, we want ripeness in our fruit. Like nobody wants to eat an underripe cherry. Like
right.
Gross.
Right.
No different than you don't want to make,
You
like,
don't
underripe
optimize
wine.
the flavor development.
Yeah.
So that's true for any fruit that's too early.
Yeah. Next time you want to talk about ripeness, go to the grocery store and just get something that's definitely like a strawberry that's like still white.
Right.
And not intentionally so. And try it and you'll see what she's
the green tomatoes or
totally. If you're not going to fry them and coat them in delicious butter, do with that what you will. And so are we the furthest south that you go for this wine with Santa Barbara?
Yes, that's as far as I go.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful area there.
I know, I love it.
I think that if I'm obviously living on the East Coast again, but if I were to move back to California and I couldn't go back to Napa Valley, I'd be in Santa Barbara.
100%.
Yeah. It's so beautiful. And it's like the weather there.
Yes.
It feels very coastal, but it's comfortable.
I love, too, that there's a lack of pretension and it's kind of casual.
Which is kind of surprising given the
feel.
proximity to LA.
Mm-hmm. No, I love it has a laid-back character.
Yeah. Where do you like to be? Like, do you like to be downtown Santa Barbara? Do you like to be more like in the wine growing area? Because the wine growing area is pretty far from downtown.
Right. I like both.
Yeah.
I like both. I was just down there and stayed downtown. It was really fun.
Oh, nice.
Downtown's great.
Downtown's awesome. And I think I've talked about it twice now on this podcast. I've talked about Loquita, which is the Spanish like tapas place.
Yes.
So good. So good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was at the Bacara, and we actually did a podcast from there at the Bacara, and it was just a perfect representation of Santa Barbara. And I think California, if you were to like kind of like lump everything, it's just this beautiful, vast place that just seems so impressive. And growing up on the East Coast, there's nothing quite so big out there that is really comparable to what's in California, which I find fascinating. And the light is different here.
Totally.
The light's the best here.
Totally.
I'm getting married in California because of the light here.
Ooh, where are you getting married?
We'll reveal that later.
Oh, okay. All right. Sorry.
No,
spoiler alert.
Don't be sorry. That was a great question. But when we were thinking about all the places in the world to get married, I just kept coming back to California and how beautiful it was and all the different light and just, it's a place that in a lot of ways feels like home, even though it's not, because I think it grounds you in a way that I don't really feel in other places.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So we should travel back up?
Sure.
To Napa, or do we have a stop in between?
No, there's no stop in between.
So let's go back to Napa.
Okay, that's right, because there's that 1% Napa Valley.
You can't ignore the Napa.
So the Napa Valley is just, I don't know if I should say it on camera, but it's like a classified Keplinger Cabernet Sauvignon. So it's from some really great places in Napa Valley, but just didn't make our Cabernet wines. I love that. So
it's a little teeny piece of something probably a lot more expensive.
Yes.
And it's like getting like Wagyu for dinner at night and then like making fried rice in the morning and like having that little nubbin go in there.
Yes, just that little.
Yeah, it still tastes delicious.
So true. Oh, that's great. Yeah. So, I think Napa is really, really interesting as well. I mean, also has a temperature gradient that is influenced by San Francisco and San Pablo Bays. So north is warmer in general, and south is cooler with that air current. But diversity of soils is really incredible. So. I've heard
we have like half the world's soil orders in this little.
I've heard we have over
done all the things,
137 different soil types or something like that. But in general, I think thinking about California, you have to think about the formation and tectonic plates and fault lines and things like that. So there's a fault line that runs north-south in Napa. And it's on. Actually, I'm sure there's more than one fault line, but the main one is it's just off Highway 29, parallel to 29, just west of 29. And so west of that, and also this influences a lot of California soils, is just remembering that we have the continental plate and you have the Pacific plate, and the Pacific plate subducts under the continental plate and scrapes it almost like, the continental plate scrapes it almost like a razor, and then you have this buckling effect with the mountains. And so that kind of continues all the way into Napa, the really west edge of Napa. And so the west of this fault line, you have kind of those soils, and then you have soils that were pushed up and mixed around in the formation of the mountains. And then just east of it, you have a lot of volcanic influence. And those volcanic soils, there's also an enormous diversity of those, not to make it any simpler.
You guys thought it was easy.
But,
California wine.
But I mean, you have red volcanic soils that are really iron rich. You have volcanic soils that are basalt. You have volcanic soils that are obsidian and glass and sort of, ash, everything in between. So the soils that go into these vineyards, and then, you also have alluvial soils, which are all of the sediments that are in, the rivers and the old creeks that ran through the valley. So just a huge amount of diversity in the valley. And it's part of why there's so many different Cabernets that taste different.
Yeah. Well, and it's also a literal valley, which I feel like people forget. Like, we're literally situated between two mountain ranges, which everyone forgets. So you also have, in addition to all of these different soil types, you have different elevations and different expositions, and not everything is going to taste the same from one AVA to another, because of so many different things. And it's one of the smaller AVAs in California, which I think everybody assumes Napa is huge, but it's not. It's only about 30 miles north to south and like 5 across or something.
Right.
Yeah.
It is very small. And there's a lot that changes within it. So these two main vineyards, one is mountaintop, and it's very red rocky soils, just really beautiful, surrounded by wilderness. So the wines up there tend to be have really intense fruit and really great structure. But also a lot of minerality, a lot of dried aromatic herbs and flowers, and just beautiful fruit.
Yeah.
And with that elevation and the structure of those soils, the grapes tend to take a little bit longer to really come into balance because there is so much phenolic content. But wow, just incredibly ageable, really beautiful Bordeaux varietals.
Yeah.
And then the other one is right where the mountain meets the floor, which is that like sweet spot, because you get the soil from the floor and the soil that's left down from the mountains. So you get this wonderful combination of really well-drained mountain soil that's not quite as extreme, and there's also some protection. This is east-facing, so there's some protection from afternoon, and also remembering in Napa, with these two different ranges. On the east side, we have the Vaca. If you look at it, it's like a lot of scrub, and it's very rocky and red, and I feel like the wines have that aromatic profile of just what I mentioned, kind of dried aromatic herbs, dried flowers. There's a minerality. And then when you look at the west side, that western range is Mayacamas, and it's just filled with forest and really refreshes the air. And so those wines tend to have more of a forest character, forest floor, or a fresh green note, and a kind of a cooling to them. And so these are these two like teeny tiny bits of Cabernet that go into this wine.
Isn't it? I mean, it's crazy to think that we've talked about the state and we've talked about all these different places, and then even within these places, there's so much diversity.
There's so much diversity.
We couldn't begin to, we could do 11 podcasts and not even
No, it's true.
Skim the surface.
You could just do one on, even within a vineyard, there's just so much change. It's
do you
really
think
fun.
There's anything within the different AVAs and places that we talked about, do you think there's one particular that over-delivers on quality for the price right now?
It's funny that it's a great question, and I feel like from every region, I think there are those like $30 wines if you look for them.
Yeah.
Which is even Napa, which kind of blows my mind.
Yeah.
It's great.
It is great.
I still feel like the Sierra Foothills over-deliver for the price. I think Paso has great wines for the price as well. And then I think Santa Barbara wines are very reasonably priced too. So
I do too. And I think there's we've had Presqu'île's Chardonnay. I don't know if you know them. They're in Santa Maria Valley, but they do a Santa Barbara AVA wine that's like $25-$30. That's incredible.
Yeah. The beauty of those areas, Paso, Santa Barbara, and the foothills is the fruit tends to be less expensive. So you have this ability for young, talented people who want to, try something of their own to be able to. The price of entry is attainable. And so they can afford to go and buy. It's how I started. I started with 250 cases and a very small amount of wine. Now I have more cases and still, anyways.
We'll fix that problem.
But anyways, I think the price of entry is doable, and so you do have wines that are really, really well made and by people who are quite talented and passionate, and the price is very, very reasonable.
Where do you think people should be looking in terms of the other varieties right now? We've talked about Grenache, Syrah, Mourvedre. Are there other varieties that you're excited about in the state of California?
I think those three regions, it's sort of the same. It's the same thing. The land isn't so expensive. And the fruit doesn't cost so much that it makes sense to plant only, this varietal that, yields so much more in terms of grape sales. And your land is therefore more valuable, or, your crop is more valuable. And so there are people able to experiment with these things. And the one variety that I am really excited about, that I keep hearing little whispers of finally getting planted, finally they're getting clean material, is Nerello Mascalese.
Really?
Have you heard that too? Yes.
Oh, the
yes.
Sicilian variety.
Yes.
Yeah, I know they have a little in Sassoon, because I almost played with that. Somebody's got it planted over there. I love Nerello Mascalese.
Yeah. So that, I don't know that I'm seeing it yet, but I'm excited to see that soon.
I love that. Yeah, I love the idea of Italian varieties, especially, or more so Sicilian varieties in California, like Nero d'Avola, Nerello Mascalese, Dolcetto, which is not Sicilian, but you know what I mean. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, I think it's opening up to more Italian varieties, which is really fun. And I think that's new. That feels new. Even Nebbiolo.
Yes. Well, you're going to have to point me in the direction of a good California Nebbiolo.
If I find
I'm still not sold on Nebbiolo being able to perform outside of Piedmont.
I know. It's true.
They're just kind of married.
But that's how it started with, Cabernet and
it's
Bordeaux
true.
and
it's so true.
Pinot Noir and Burgundy. So
I actually asked a very famous Italian winemaker who also makes wine here in California. I said, why haven't you guys figured this out yet? Between Sangiovese and Nebbiolo, why hasn't it been done the way that you guys can do it? And he said the same thing. He said, it's just time. He said, we figured it out with Bordeaux. He said, we'll figure it out for this.
I agree. It's just nascent right now, that's all.
Which is promising, I feel.
Yeah, and exciting.
So exciting. Speaking of exciting, I know there's a very exciting event on the horizon for you and for the Valley, which is the Winapalooza that our friend Monica Stevens has put on for many years.
Yes.
And you've been kind of part of since the beginning.
Jameson Humane is an incredible organization that Monica started years ago, and its mission is to improve animal welfare, and they collaborate globally but act a lot locally. And it's very well supported by the local wine community, and she has been having this incredible auction in the summer called Winapalooza. This is the 14th year? Or 12th year? 12th year. Okay, so 12th year. Maybe it started in 2014. I think that's
maybe
when I'm
she was
getting my signals
concepting it
crossed.
for 14 years.
Yeah,
no,
probably. But every year she really she works really hard with an incredible team of an incredible auction team to come up with really creative wine lots. And there's a beautiful wine tasting, and I mean, the best wines in the valley.
Crazy lots for these auctions.
With the winemakers and the vintners, and the lots for the auction are really incredible. So first there's a tasting, and then there's a sit-down dinner with delicious food, and there's an auction. And some of the lots this year that are really exciting are tacos with Thomas Brown.
So casual.
There's a scarecrow tasting with Mimi and. I just blanked on his name, thanks.
Yeah.
So there's a scarecrow tasting with Mimi and Brett Lopez, and they're incredible people, and this wine is such a beautiful wine. There's also every year Jeannie Phillips, the original owner of Screaming Eagle, she's so generous, and she donates a large format of Screaming Eagle. So there aren't many spots left, but if you are a wine lover and an animal lover, it's a pretty special event, and the community really rallies around it.
Yeah.
So I would just go to her website, which is
winapalooza.com, and we'll link everything in the description so you can take a peek at it. You can see the auction lots when they get announced, and then there's also usually a silent auctions or like an online auction that you can take part in as well.
Right.
So if you can't make it to the event, that's a great way. And you can also just support the cause by donating. Because it's a great cause, and as Helen said, it is really well supported by the community. I think some of the things that they've done that have been more close to home is, especially after the fires and some of these big events,
evacuations.
We always, we think about our things, we think about our people, but the animals, we have to think about the animals and, what happens to them. And so Jameson is always there to support both, animal pets who maybe can't go to hotels, and then also like horses and cows and, these animals that literally get, unhoused the way that other people do.
Right.
And they're there to support, and they really do. They do the work. It's kind of incredible.
They do. They really do.
So, well, thank you for supporting that cause for as long as you have.
It's been an honor and a pleasure.
And you guys will be pouring, of course, at the tasting.
We will be pouring. We have poured every year, all 11 years, I guess.
Fantastic. Well, for those of you who, like I said, have been drinking with us, we've had the 2022 Vermillion by Helen Keplinger. This is delicious. I'm so excited that we finally got to include this. This has been kind of
Me too. Thank
on
you
our
so much
list
for
for
doing
a little while. A perfect way to explore California and, of course, get to talk to you, which I don't do enough. But we will, of course, link everything in the description that you need. If you're not a member of the Unfiltered Podcast Wine Club, this is your sign. Here with Helen, you get great wines like this. It's 4 wines that get sent to you about every other month. I do the picking along with our wonderful wine access team, and it's $120 plus tax, but including shipping, and you get 10% off of all of your wine access purchases, which means if you want to go back, you want to get more of this wine, you're going to get 10% off, and that feels like a great deal. So there's some girl math in there, I'm pretty sure. Thank you so much. This has been so fun.
Thank you for having me.
Happy Friday.
So fun.
Any
Happy
big plans
Friday,
in Napa
everybody.
Valley today? Happy hour somewhere?
Oh, well, probably just, it's,
Like
it's,
at home?
Yeah.
Yeah, I gotcha.
It's family night tonight,
Nice.
so I'll be watching a movie with my 8-year-old and having a glass of wine on the couch.
Do you know what movie?
No, I don't. We've been doing the vintage Disney movies, but I feel like we've run through a lot of those.
Can rewatch?
Yeah. But I don't know, maybe what's one that we haven't done, like the King of Egypt we haven't done. There are a few that we haven't
that's so
done.
strange. I was just listening to the Prince of Egypt soundtrack last
Prince
night.
of Egypt,
Yes,
thank you.
Because that's one of the great songs,
Yes.
the Mariah Carey, Whitney Houston collab.
Oh,
great.
that's good.
It's a good one.
Okay, I will put in a word for that
But
film
also, like,
tonight.
have you done, like, The Parent Trap from the 90s?
No, not yet.
Because that's
We
in
will.
Napa.
Yes, I know. He's had sort of a preference for animated films.
That's fair.
So,
I like that.
yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to go to Charlie's for happy hour because that's where I go.
Oh, I love
Yes,
that. I love
and,
Charlie's.
Continue watching. I don't have kids, so I watch, The White Lotus, Thailand. But hopefully you guys will be doing the same as well after this.
Yes.
I wish you all a wonderful weekend or whatever day of the week it is for you. Cheers, and I'll see you soon.
Yeah, cheers. Cheers. Thank you.